Buenas tardes a todos. Continuamos con la siguiente conferencia que es FDA's New Era of Smarter Food Safety. Les recuerdo de que esta conferencia es en inglés, entonces si necesitan apoyo para un traductor o algo así, pueden encontrarlo atrás de las cámaras. Presento la biografía de Rita Vera. Rita Vera se ha incorporado a la Oficina de América Latina como especialista en relaciones internacionales, con sede en San José, Costa Rica, donde se centra en productos alimenticios. Ella anteriormente fue analista de políticas internacionales en la FDA, Centro de Seguridad Alimentaria y Nutrición Aplicada. Ahí dirigió el programa de reconocimiento de sistemas. Vera también ha trabajado como enlace de salud pública en la FDA. Es un gusto para mí presentar a Rita Vera.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. My name's Rita Vera, and I work with FDA's Latin America office. FDA's Latin America office actually has 3 offices, one in Chile, one in Mexico, and one in Costa Rica. I just arrived to the Costa Rica office in August, so I'm new to the position, new to the Spanish language, and new to some of the issues that I'm going to talk about with you today. So I wanted to thank you in advance for your patience. I'm really, really happy to be here with everyone. This is also the first time I've traveled or presented since the pandemic, and it's really a treat to be in beautiful Guatemala, in this beautiful hotel, with all of you beautiful people. So thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm going to talk to you a little bit, actually kind of a lot today, about the new era of smarter food safety. And this isn't a usual FDA presentation. The new era of smarter food safety isn't a new policy, it's not a new regulation. It's about processes, it's about strategy, and it's about working together to solve food safety challenges unique to the 21st century and the future. I'd like to emphasize for those of you who are familiar with the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA, that the new era of smarter food safety is really based on FSMA. FSMA provides the regulatory framework for the strategies that we're hoping to develop as part of the new era. FSMA implementation remains a key priority for FDA, and the new era strategies are tools we can use together to streamline implementation by integrating industry, science, and technology. Okay, so the new era of smarter food safety has 4 main elements that I'm going to cover with you guys today. One is tech-enabled traceability. Another is smarter tools and approaches for prevention and outbreak response. Another is new business models and retail modernization. And last but not least is food safety culture. These elements cover a range of technologies, analytics, business models, and values that are foundational to food safety. They're all connected. As I go through them, there's going to be a lot of overlap. You're going to see connections. That's what we want. And that's what will allow the new era of smarter food safety to move forward. Each of these 4 elements has sub-elements. Okay, so you can see each of the 4 that we talked about before has smaller bullets that we've started to break into categories of work for us to do at FDA. As we discuss these core elements, I'd really like you guys in the audience to think about how those various topics are relevant to your work. Does it sound like something you've already done? Does it sound like something you would like to do? Is it something you'd like to learn more about, or is there information you can share with FDA or that you would like to hear from FDA about any of them? The first element that I'd like to talk about is tech-enabled traceability. We've heard a little bit about traceability today, and I think we're all familiar with the challenges that we face with foodborne illness, illustrate how critical it is that FDA and other government agencies work with industry to trace a contaminated food to its most specific source in minutes, not days or weeks or longer. Better traceability also supports the transparency needed to better understand the supply chain. In the event of a public health crisis, as we've been going through, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, and to help us create a more resilient and harmonized food system. Ultimately, the goal is to have end-to-end fast traceability throughout the food safety system by encouraging the adoption of harmonized tracing technologies. Okay, so what does that mean? We've broken down some of our priorities for traceability into these three sub-elements. We have developing foundational components, encouraging and incentivizing industry adoption of new technologies, and leveraging digital transformation. So we'll talk first about developing foundational components because this is something we're going to see in every other core element and every other sub-element. This is about standardizing traceability language so that when we're communicating with each other about where a tomato came from or where some lettuce came from, we're using the same language, and we're using the same language to trace it from end to end, and we're using the same language to communicate about that traceability exercise and find the source of any outbreaks that we need to. And we know that traceability is not just a priority for FDA, but for industry, for consumers, and for government agencies around the world as well. We'll be mindful of that, and where possible, we want to make sure that we're using existing consensus standards. So this means that we need to learn what's going on around the world in terms of traceability, what's going on in industry, what serves consumers. 1.2, encourage and incentivize adoption of new technologies. We would begin with this the same way we would begin anything we wanted to encourage, and that is with outreach. And that's why I'm here, is to just start talking about tech-enabled traceability, start talking about what technologies can support it, what's working, what's not working, and what we can do to move things forward. We also want to explore ways for FDA to recognize adoption of strong traceability systems in how we approach our food safety oversight activities. So what this means is, let's say FDA is planning an inspection. We're going to use a model to we're going to use a risk model to determine how many inspection frequency, to determine what exactly we're going to inspect when we're there. What can we do to incorporate, if we know that a certain firm or a certain government or a certain commodity has a really good end-to-end traceability system, we would like to explore ways to take that into consideration in our risk analysis that we use to set up our inspections. So that's something we're looking at as well. We also want to recognize that new technology can be expensive. We want to encourage technology providers to develop creative financial models at low to no cost solutions. We want to look at what we can do within FDA to support that. And we always want to be mindful that if the benefit of the traceability system is not greater than the cost, it's not going to be viable on the ground. So we want to take all of those factors into consideration. The first sub-element that I talked about, creating those foundational elements to make sure we're speaking the same language about traceability, comes down to technology. We want to implement an internal FDA digital technology system to receive data from industry and regulatory partners. So this is a challenge for FDA. We have our traceability systems that we use, and sometimes there's really great information out there or a really great traceability system that we can't receive information from just because the technology is different or because the science behind it is different. And that's something we're working on internally and that you'll probably hear from us about as we continue to work through that. Okay, so I can't talk about traceability without talking about the food traceability proposed rule. And I want to begin, as I do whenever I talk about a proposed rule, by talking a little bit about our rulemaking process, because we want people engaged. We want your feedback. We want input from industry. We want input from consumer groups. We want input from regulatory systems around the world, competent authorities. We propose a rule. We have a comment period. We usually have public hearings and public notices. There are opportunities to provide input. And we are required by our government to read every single comment and to listen to every single piece of stakeholder input that we get during those events. So the food traceability proposed rule is really tracing back again to how can we speak the same language about traceability. This rule changes record keeping requirements. So this isn't a rule that tells you what you can and can't do. It's a rule that tells you how we want you to report it to us. And really the idea there is that we can begin to streamline the information we can share and receive about traceability, so that we can respond more specifically and more quickly to outbreaks. And the idea is that eventually we would be working with standardized data elements. Okay. The food traceability list. This one's interesting because the Food Safety Modernization Act required FDA to designate high-risk foods that the requirements in the proposed rule would apply to. Now remember, those are record-keeping requirements. Rather than designate them as high risk, we created what we called a food traceability list. Because we want this to be a cooperative effort. The idea, again, is to be in communication. To determine which foods would be included, we developed a risk ranking model for food tracing. That's covered in a lot of detail on our website. It takes into consideration everything from the origin of a specific type of food to the type of foodborne illness and the severity of the disease it could carry. Lots of public health data goes into it. Lots of agricultural data goes into it. And you can look into it more on our website. It would take me the rest of the day to explain the whole thing. Okay. Using the results of the risk ranking model, we tentatively identified foods for the traceability list, for which, like I said earlier, additional traceability records would be required. If there are updates to the food traceability list, again, just to go back to the rulemaking process, FDA would do so via a notice in the Federal Register, providing the public with an opportunity to comment. So if we were to take herbs off and add beef, which we couldn't do because it's not in our jurisdiction anyway, but if we were to make any change to this list, we would have to put it in the Federal Register and release it for comment. So you'd have another opportunity to let us know what you think, how it's going to work for you, how it's not going to work for you, how does it impact your business. The next core element is smarter tools and approaches for prevention and outbreak response. So this is very closely related to the first one, right? Traceability is a key element in prevention and outbreak response. As modern food safety approaches generate new data streams and tools for rapidly analyzing data become available, we'll continue to explore their preventive value. And what we're really interested in is looking at how we can more efficiently and effectively carry out our oversight of the food industry. So what are some of those smarter tools and approaches that we'll be looking at? We are looking to invigorate root cause analysis efforts, strengthen predictive analysis, and continue to work in domestic mutual reliance. That one's interesting, and it's something I'd like to adjust for this audience when we get there. Domestic mutual reliance is very important, but I think it's something that we need to think about through an international lens for it to be truly effective. But let's start with root cause analysis. Root cause analyses are critical to learning what went wrong and how to prevent such problems from occurring again. We'll be looking specifically at developing new models for conducting root cause analyses, strengthening our procedures to ensure rapid and coordinated deployment of regulatory resources, improving how we report our analyses, again using standardized formats to exchange information, and enhance communication tools to disseminate information. We want to continue all of these elements that I'll cover today. We want to continue to look at our options for incorporating those elements into our risk ranking and analytic systems so that we take them into consideration when we're planning our inspections. We're also, in sub-element 2 in predictive analysis, we're looking at how to expand how FDA mines data to strengthen our predictive analytics capabilities, using new tools such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. So this involves looking for new sources of data, both public and private, that we can rely on to strengthen our preventive approaches. Some really interesting examples of new sources of data that I've heard about working at FDA have been consumer reviews, have been looking at what people are buying over the counter in a specific town. If everybody's all of a sudden buying the same medication, there might be an outbreak. If everyone's leaving negative feedback about a certain product on its website, this made my stomach upset, this made my daughter sick, we might have a problem there. So we're starting to try to learn how to take in different kinds of data and how to mine those data. Another interesting movement in data analytics is using artificial intelligence for screening at the border. We're currently advancing a pilot for screening imported seafood at ports of entry and hoping to learn from that pilot and look at what we can do to expand that effort so that our screenings at the border are more accurate, faster, and less costly to industry. And last but not least, we're exploring technologies to enhance predictive toxicology tools that identify and characterize food chemical hazards. So that'll be a new area for us and one that we're very much interested in. And last but not least, mutual reliance. So in this context, FDA is talking about working at the federal level with our state partners. And I would propose that it's equally as important that we work with our international partners and that we learn what types of information we can rely on each other for and how to standardize those information exchanges. Okay, 3 more sub-elements under smarter tools and approaches. Inspection, training, and compliance tools, outbreak response, and recall modernization. We plan to leverage technology and smart approaches to improve FDA's inspections and trainings. We want them to be efficient, we want them to be less costly, and we want them to be less burdensome. Specifically, we'll be evaluating feasibility of remote, virtual, and component inspections. We've learned over the past few years that alternative approaches can vastly improve our efficiency, but we need to ensure that we're still providing effective oversight and keeping the food supply safe. We have been doing some remote inspections under the FSVP rule during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we'd like to imagine how valuable it would be to use that tool for other types of inspections during a public health emergency. Also, encouraging the use of reliable audits. So where can we, instead of relying on inspections, rely on an audit over the inspections and understand that things are moving as they should and that we don't need to go into the firm. And another quick touch on computer-based and distance learning. I talked a little bit about virtual inspections. Another thing that we are exploring is expanding availability of trainings virtually to help improve compliance with FDA safety requirements. That's one of the things that we work a lot on in the Latin America offices in Santiago, in San Jose, and in Mexico, is training and really trying to help folks on the ground, on the farms, in the firms, on the farms, learn how to comply so that they can export their product smoothly to the US. So while the focus of this core element is prevention, we also need to enhance and strengthen our response when outbreaks do occur. So this involves working with our domestic and foreign regulatory partners to accelerate submission of reports of foodborne illnesses. It includes increasing the number of laboratories, both in the United States and abroad, that have the capacity to process samples so that we can trace outbreaks back to their source as quickly as possible. Also learning how we can leverage industry food testing results to more quickly identify outbreak sources. I would be remiss not to mention whole genome sequencing, facilitating the use of that to help us respond more quickly, and using artificial intelligence to track non-traditional sources of information that I talked about before, customer reviews, medication sales trends, things like that. Last but not least, we have recall modernization under smarter tools and approaches. This is very much about communication. FDA recognizes the need to find ways to communicate more quickly and effectively with all of our stakeholders about recalled products that pose a risk to public health. So this requires some better harmonization within US government entities, but also around the world. And looking at best practices for consumer notification. Instead of, people don't necessarily sit down every night and watch the news anymore, so should we be sending a text? Should we be sending emails or digital scan prompts when we do have a recall that we need to address? Okay. This slide has a lot of words on it. I wanted to touch quickly on whole genome sequencing, but I want to use this instead. Because I just think it really shows how this was an outbreak traced back to a fishery in India. And if it weren't for whole genome sequencing, we would have been trying to address the recall all the way up at those top lines. Because of whole genome sequencing, we were able to identify specifically what lots were contaminated and keep the recall as small and specific as possible. So we want to continue to improve that process. We want to continue to build whole genome sequencing communications and capacities. Okay, core element 3 is new business models and retail modernization. So what are we going to do to smooth things out, to keep things safer at the retail level, at the point of sale? That's really where the consumer is interacting with everything that everyone in this room has done comes to a head right there when the consumer is in the store looking at what's on the shelf and making a purchase. So the evolution of how food gets from farm to home continues with the emergence of e-commerce and new delivery methods, new delivery models. This element also covers novel ingredients and new ways of producing food, such as cell-cultured agriculture. Okay. I just mentioned online sales. We're very, very interested in looking at best practices in Latin America and around the world around e-commerce. How is it being regulated? How are the goods moving safely from the producer to the consumer? We have a lot to learn about what that process looks like. And I would also point out that, as we move to e-commerce, not only are we changing the way the market looks, but we're also changing who has access to the market. We saw during the COVID pandemic as online shopping became more common, that the market expanded to other demographics. So we were looking at elderly and other vulnerable populations who might have tried it for the first time during COVID. So this is a new area of growth for everyone. We knew it was coming, but COVID certainly sped it up, and we're very much interested in taking our lessons learned and seeing what we can do to continue to develop systems and technologies together to make sure that new business models are safe. Okay, we're also looking to modernize our approach to traditional retail food safety. We'll need to work with partners on creating effective educational and training materials for regulators, industry, and consumers. So for regulators, to improve oversight of retail food establishments, for industry, including incorporating food safety management systems and how to do that most easily, and to consumers to help them improve safe handling of food at home. Because I could do my job perfectly and you could do your job perfectly, and somebody in that house doesn't wash their hands and we have a situation. So we want to make sure that we're doing this end to end, all the way to the consumer. Okay, food safety culture. So this one's hard to talk about because it's culture, right? It's not something that we can trace. It's not something that we can measure. It's difficult, but one of the things we've learned is that, what we say or what we write in our regulations about food safety does matter, but it's not what matters most. It's what we do as a society, our behaviors. So sort of the mantra here is food safety equals behavior. And when I think about food safety culture, I think about the things that happen to promote food safety that are not mandated by a regulation or a policy or an owner to the workers. It's something that's ingrained in the culture. It's something you do automatically without thinking about it. And that's why we need to work together to foster, support, and strengthen food safety cultures on farms and in food facilities and at homes. We won't make dramatic improvements in reducing the burden of foodborne disease without doing more to influence what employees think about what employees think about food safety and how they show a commitment to this goal in their job every day. Okay. So these are some of the sub-elements just to sort of show the way we think about food safety culture. You'll see in the middle is behavioral science. So, at FDA, we do a lot of work. We do a lot of risk-based science. Behavioral science is something we're learning we really need to pay closer attention to and make sure that we're understanding when we write a regulation or write a policy that's supposed to be put into action in a firm or at a farm, that it makes sense culturally in that environment. So some of the actions that we plan to take over the coming years are to support research, to develop a food safety culture social marketing campaign, and as I mentioned earlier, to ensure FDA training incorporates behavioral science. So again, if you're going to take that HACCP training or you're going to take that FSMA training, we want to make sure that there's behavioral science backing up the training. Okay. And element 4.3, the last piece of the food safety culture puzzle, has to do with consumers. We really want to do outreach to make sure that consumers understand the importance of food safety. And one more thing, actually, I forgot to mention, under promoting food safety throughout the agency, this isn't just throughout the agency. One of the strategies that we're looking into, and I mentioned this earlier, a similar tactic with traceability, we want to find ways to incorporate food safety culture into our risk-based inspectional planning. So if we know that a farm or a firm or a commodity or a certain government oversight, a certain government authority has a very strong food safety culture, then we'd like to find ways to take that into account when we're planning inspections and audits. Okay. Okay, so those are the four main elements of the new era of smarter food safety. We're really excited to work together with all of our stakeholders in the coming years as we all kind of come out of our pandemic cocoons, and look at how we can work together more efficiently and more effectively. I have up here our website. It has all the information I just shared with you is there. There's also a place to subscribe to updates. I think that would be, I would encourage signing up for updates, and I would especially encourage, like I talked about before, if and when there are opportunities to participate in the rulemaking process, if you'd like to submit a comment on a proposed rule, if you would like to learn how to send your comments into a public hearing or attend a public hearing, reach out, let us know. There's a Contact Us, Smarter Food Safety. They'll take questions and triage them. You can also reach out to the Latin America office, and we can help you submit your comments. We can help you participate in the regulatory process that impacts your businesses, that impacts your consumers and your governments as well. Okay. So this last slide, just to get the question and answer session going, this is how I think about food safety. Like, we're all working really hard to keep doing what we're doing, and at some point we might need to pause, take the square wheels off, put on round ones, really use the technology that we've developed, and help each other, you know? Let's help each other find rounder wheels. And that's it. I'm open to take questions. I'd also love to hear if folks have anything to share about any of those core elements and initiatives they have taken there.
Muchas gracias, Rita. Vamos a proceder con preguntas. Si en dado caso tienen una en español, yo le voy a poner un traductor a ella para que puedan hacerlo.
Ah, okay. Perfect. Gracias.
Hello, Rita, and
Hi.
welcome to Guatemala. As a new company that wants to venture, we have a lot of experience internally, Central America. We want to venture into the U.S. market. What will be your recommendation, the steps we should follow to be compliant with the FDA and all the different government agencies in the U.S.? I do live in the United States, so I'm very familiar with the practices. But as a new company that wants to export specifically food, what will be the steps that you will recommend?
So, thank you for the question. A good step is always, feel free to reach out to our offices, to Latin America office. We can not always provide the answers, but we can always find the right person who can. Also, working with industry associations can be very helpful. You'll be teamed up with people who have been doing this, who have been exporting to the U.S. for decades, and they know the rules. They know the rules very well. And just know that we're appreciative of folks affirmatively reaching out to find out about compliance. Our website can be difficult. We're here to help with that. I usually recommend going to question and answer pages when possible. And always, this is the lawyer in me, always check applicability. I've had many times when I was helping someone try to understand a rule, and then we realized it didn't even apply. because they didn't make a certain amount or they weren't exporting a certain amount. So first check all your thresholds and make sure the rule applies, and then we can help you with the rule itself. Yep.
Hola Rita, yo tengo una duda acerca de los procesos de trazabilidad. En una planta de alimentos pues se me hace un poquito más fácil que todas las fases del proceso se puedan estar chequeando. En una planta por ejemplo, una plantación de tomate, ¿cómo se ve eso reflejado? Es decir, tendrían que haber como stands donde hubieran escáneres para pasar cada fase de tomate. O sea, tengo una duda al respecto. Y al final, ¿hasta dónde va a llegar como la parte de la confidencialidad, tal vez, de los productores? O sea, ¿qué información va a ser importante reflejar en esa trazabilidad en términos de cantidades de fertilizantes o pesticidas? O sea, ¿cuáles son los intereses, más que todo, de la FDA en cuestión de eso?
Thank you. That's a great question. And we put the QR code on the tomato as kind of a joke to get exactly that question, because we know, especially with fresh produce, it's almost impossible. We have found really good ways, stickers, the little twist ties. There are great solutions to getting that end-to-end traceability. The information that's in that barcode or that QR code, that's a great question. I don't have a great answer for you, but I can tell you that FDA's interest is in protecting the public health. We want to be able to find, if somebody gets sick from that tomato, we want to be able to find as specifically as we can. If we can get not just to the farm, but to the row, so that farm can continue operating while we figure out what happened in that specific area. That's the goal, is to get as specific and as fast as we can. I appreciate the point about confidentiality concerns as well, yeah.
I have another one here. Is there any specific reason for FDA to inspect a processing facility in Guatemala?
Is there any? So there are, I think that question gets at two types of inspections. There are for-cause inspections, and then there are routine inspections. I don't know what firms in Guatemala have been inspected recently or would be slated for inspection in the future. But if somebody has a specific concern about an inspection, you can work with the Latin America office, and we can try to help you with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all very much.